So, I want to talk about everything that's been going on in the US. Um, I can tend to talk a lot, and I am very opinionated. And with the protests that are going on right now, I'm very passionate. So, gosh, let me try to make this as quick as I can because I probably don't have a lot of video recording time on my phone either. But I want to make a few thoughts, like things that have come to my mind. Anyway, I'm just going to share them because I can do that, right? Anybody can do that with YouTube. So, first off, today is what? June 6th. June 6th. So, last weekend was when the protests were like really, really intense. I live in New York City in Queens. Real intense. And I got to tell you, I was on fire last weekend. I was lit. I was I was beyond excited to feel the passion and the intensity and to see so many people out and to feel the anger. And for me, I I have felt so much anger and rage, particularly with certain instances. So, like this one, George Floyd, Eric Garner, which was so similar in so many ways. When you think about what they supposedly did in relation to the fact that they now have ended up dead, it's just ludicrous. Khalif Brower, another instance, although he didn't necessarily die at the hands of the police, but it was our prison system, our system of policing, etc., that led to his death. But those are some particular cases that have really really bothered me. But of course, obviously, there's been a pattern of this over the decades in the U.S. As far as the protests go, one observation I've made though is that there's some protests where it's primarily black folk, others where it's primarily white folk, others where it's mixed. But for the most part, when I see white people protesting, it's generally younger people. And so one thing I ask myself is, where are the older white folk? Why aren't they out there? And, when you look at the younger white folk, well, I'm sure some of them are bothered. Honestly, I think others are protesting because they think they should, or political correctness. And I personally really don't like when I hear white people talking about, we're supporting our black and brown friends, we're marching in solidarity. Because when they use terms like that, to me, it's sort of like an us them. In other words, like it's a black and brown people's issue, but we're going to march alongside them. And yes, while there's no denying that black and brown folks suffer more at the hands of police, I think every American should be outraged. I don't care what color you are. Every American should be furious. I know I am. And, to think that there's two different sets of rules, right? I mean, if a civilian did anything to a cop, we all know what happens, right? That person is found, they're taken care of one way or another, and then they go to prison. When the opposite happens, though, and a cop does something to someone, 9 times out of 10, they're not convicted. They don't go to prison. And so this is what I find so infuriating. Not to mention the police state. And it's good to see that people are finally addressing that issue too. If you think about it, the police are the first interaction that a person has before they are then introduced or become a part of the prison complex. Okay? So, it's such a big problem here in the US. We're so pro-war. We spend more on war than the next six nations combined. We're gun-happy. Hollywood blockbusters are full of violence. And then we have the highest prison rate in the world as a percentage of the overall population. 18% of all federal prisons are for profit. If that doesn't show a conflict of interest, I don't know what does. 1/3 of all people in US prisons have some form of mental illness. I mean, and then look at our police, right? Decades ago, it used to be officer friendly. Now it's paramilitary officer. And this seems to have impacted who the police academies now attract. Yeah, there are good cops, but there are some people who honestly, I think they become a cop because they have few choices. They're not educated, a lot of them, and they pass a test. Obviously, we need to eviscerate. I like to use that word. We need to eviscerate the entire system of policing in the United States. And recently there's been a lot of talk, do we need police forces at all? Well, that's up for debate. I can't give the answer to that. But if we are going to continue to have police, it needs to be completely reframed. And I think that we citizens, we who employ the police, we who pay the salaries of the police, that we should be the ones who come together and decide what are the protocols that we need to put in place to determine who does or does not get the privilege to be a cop and to serve us. It's not just passing a test. There has to be testing for emotional intelligence, a battery of personality trait analysis. Not just anyone should get to be a cop. We also need more protocols in place that we should set to decide who gets to remain a cop once they're in the academy and who gets out. Like, what's his name? The guy, Derek Chauvin. He had 18 priors, okay? He should have been on permanent desk duty or fired, period. So, yeah, we need to do something about the entire system of policing. We need to get rid of for-profit prisons. Police need to be more accountable. We need external oversight of the police. Clearly, the police don't police themselves. We see that. We know that. Also, with the recent protests, I've heard talks of justice. And when I hear talks about justice, that people want justice, the implication is that they want the people involved with George Floyd to be convicted and to go to prison. And while that's all well and good, that is nowhere near enough, because just because these guys are convicted, what are we going to do to make sure there's no more George Floyds in our future? Well, the only way we can ensure that is we need to change the system. And I don't want to hear talk about, let's figure out how to change the system. I don't want to hear about, there's potential new legislation. No, the time for talking is over. And if you ask me, I don't want to see the protests stop. I don't want to see the fervor or the passion stop until we see actual changes enacted. We've heard the talk before, and we're obviously tired of it. But again, I want to see more anger from white people. I don't want to just hear about solidarity and we're going to stand next to our black and brown brothers and sisters. Why aren't white people more infuriated? I'll tell you something else too. I'm a middle-aged white woman. I'm, somewhat educated. And, most people would say, oh, well, a woman like you have nothing to be scared of, right? But I got to tell you something. I really study cops, when I'm out in the street. And I got to tell you, NYPD, some of them, and I get a really bad feeling from some of the cops I see. They're these big, pumped up guys, testosterone-fueled, sadistic, bounty hunter type thugs. And don't even get me started on the undercovers. They are absolute scum thugs. The ones I see in New York, wow, fucking scary. And I got to tell you, again, I know as a white woman, I shouldn't have a reason to be scared of cops, right? But I'm telling you, I am scared. If I were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and had to deal with one of those particular cops that I mentioned, I got to tell you, I wouldn't put anything past them. As we all know, they can write whatever they damn please in their reports. And we all know the lingo they use, right? Furtive movements or resisting arrest. And now we've got a new one to add to the list, tripped and fell, right? You know, that older guy in, I forget where it was. But yeah, the cops pushed him. But the report said the guy tripped and fell. I wouldn't put anything past certain cops in the U.S. It's absolutely terrifying what the police have become here. And we got to do something. And like I said, I was so thrilled last weekend to see, and I got to tell you, okay, rioting and looting, technically speaking, it's not good. And technically speaking, it doesn't help matters. But I was happy to see people going nuts and being angry and being violent. Because let's face it, you can talk and talk and talk and talk, and at a certain point, you got to do something to get attention, you know? I don't know where I get this from, but I got to tell you, I was very young in the 60s. But when I watch old videos of Martin Luther King and then Malcolm X, although I haven't seen as many videos of Malcolm X, but I just know a little about him and that he wasn't exactly like Martin Luther King. And then you've got, the other direction, which is the Black Panthers. Martin Luther King was obviously amazing. And I mean, the way he spoke, you're just like, wow. And, I mean, his speeches, just some of the phrases or the some of what he said, it's just so poetic and indelible in our brains. But when I see images of Martin Luther King marching arm in arm with other people and trying to be peaceful and hopeful, yeah, it's all well and good. But I got to tell you, then I see those videos of like black folk in Chicago or wherever it would have been, getting hosed down with fire hoses, treated like dogs. And then I see the images of the Black Panthers, right? So proud, and the way they stand with their rifles. And I got to tell you, I side more with the Black Panthers. I'm like, fuck you, you fucking white people, It's like, black folk, they tried to be patient. They tried to be nice. They tried to hold their head up and take the higher ground and say, hey, we deserve to be respected. And they were shit on repeatedly, time and time and time again. And you can only take that so much, right? You can only turn the other cheek so much. And then you're like, fuck you, motherfucker. And so, yeah, I'm glad to see that happening now. But I want to see more white people with real passion. I don't want to hear talk about solidarity and, yeah, people could argue back and forth. Well, this is really an issue for black and brown folk. Political correctness. I mean, I'm white. Obviously, I can't say anything about whether it's a black person or black folks issue and whites shouldn't get involved or whites should only listen, right? Whites aren't supposed to say anything. But I'm just speaking from the heart, people, right? It makes me so angry to think that, the United States, right? It's a great country in so many ways. When you think about what it stands for, the fact that so many people from so many other countries want to come here. The possibilities of this country are so amazing. But let's face it, this country has lost its way. And so it's heartbreaking to me to think that we have allowed our civil servants, our police, to mistreat and slaughter our fellow Americans, black and brown folk, fellow Americans. And so that's why I'm so angry. And you talk about hypocrisy, right? The USA number one, and, pointing the fingers at other countries as being barbaric and backwards. Well, Look at yourself, USA, right? Look at yourself. Um, and, another thing I guess I would say, and I don't know, maybe people think this is stupid of me to say, middle-aged white woman, but the truth is, I love black folk, and I especially love African Americans. I often think like I truly feel they're a special people. I lived in Harlem for 7 years. And I especially love older black folk and who have a real connection with family down south. There's just this special way, this spirit they have, this sense of humor, this heart, this soul. And when you think how much shit African Americans have been through and how much they continue to go through, and they're just beaten down time and time and time again. And yet, for the most part, black folk, as we saw even in the recent marches, they try to be positive. They try to be hopeful. They march with white people and say, hey, let's all try and get along. Let's try and, push for positive change. And I'm like, where do black folk get the dignity, the patience, if you will, the goodness in their heart to continue to try and be hopeful? And if that right there doesn't show the crime that so many people think badly of black folk or of African Americans, if anything, it should be the other way around, right? I mean, there's good white people in the world. I say that half jokingly as a white person, but no, there's a lot of good white people in the world. But if you think about collectively speaking throughout the world, white, so to speak, white countries and white cultures, they've really done some bad shit in the world, right? And yeah, I don't know. I hope people are getting some of what I'm trying to say. But anyway, I'm sort of exhausted after saying all this. I don't know. I guess I'll see how people respond to my video. Peace out. Power to the people. And remember, eviscerate the entire system of policing in the United States. Get rid of the for-profit prison system, etc., etc. Okay, signing off, my fellow Americans.